Chapter 4. As the sun sunk behind the mountains, I dressed for dinner. It was the first in my stepmother's schedule of events. Between negotiations, the men would go hunting for wild boar in the forest. Evenings were given out to dinners, cards, and on the final night there would be a grand assembly to which my stepmother had invited half of the German-speaking world. All talk of the witch was banned within the palace walls. This week my father was modern German, and we were all ordered to be so too. However risky the timing, this was his opportunity, and not even the witch would be allowed to threaten it. I decided to make an effort. I had a new evening dress in soft heather-colored velvet with a 3-tiered underskirt, the overskirt drawn up full over the bustle to be held in place by cloth roses and ruffles. The off-the-shoulder neckline exposed my décolletage, and I wore only a thin black choker. My hair was piled onto my head, arranged over several rats and hair pieces to make me look something like fashionable. I was not a beauty, I knew that much. Cheeks always red from so much time outdoors, the high dome of my forehead always burned. Hair bleached blonde by the sun, and so dry it clouded out around my face with each stroke of the brush. There was only one feature I liked, my eyes. Blue like the slices of agate my father had given me on my 10th birthday, sharp and watchful even when hidden behind the little wire-framed glasses I wore when I read. I caught sight of myself in a mirror as I went downstairs, and my heart sank. A beautiful dress on an ugly woman still made an ugly woman. Drinks were on the way, and I slipped in, making myself acquainted with a glass of schnapps as soon as possible. A gong sounded, and my stepmother began to bring the pairs together to lead us down to dinner. Clara and my father were paired and positioned, and my stepmother was leading her partner into the line. I chewed the side of my tongue. I hadn't been given a partner. Had I missed some communication earlier telling me who I should be with? I scanned the room, but saw no spare man. I drew up beside my stepmother. "I'm not sure who I am to escort," I said quietly. I knew enough not to draw attention to myself. She turned away from her conversation, brows knitting together in confusion. "Mina?" She took in the completed line of guests, and me, outside it, and went pink beneath her rouge as her mistake hit her. "You cannot expect me to keep on top every minor detail." I swallowed against a hot lump in my throat. There was no one for me to go to dinner with, because there was no place for me at the table. She had forgotten me. Should I have cook send me up a tray? "Whatever you want to do." She offered her arm to her partner and turned her back on me. The guests crossed to the dining room, and I did my best to slip away unnoticed. I felt too hot and cold at once. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, trying to outrun the shadow that curled around my edges. I sat halfway up the stairs that curved around either side of the hall, resting my forehead against the banisters. Above me spread a fresco that covered the whole ceiling, showing the bounty of Schwarzstein, farmers harvesting sheaves of wheat in one corner, women spinning vast clouds of wool in another, framed by the mountains and the river. On the opposite staircase, the head butler hurried down to the dining room, a note card held on a silver tray. I thought about throwing myself over the edge. I could picture it perfectly, the rush of air against my skin, the crunch of bone as I struck the marble. I felt hollow, like a piece of dead wood rotten from the inside out. Perhaps if I jumped, I would only shatter into pieces that could be swept up and tidied away. Jump, don't jump, none of it mattered. I was done here. The door to the dining room opened, and my father slipped out. He held the note card scrunched in one hand and took the stairs 2 at a time. At the landing, he went left towards his study. Something was wrong. A moment later, I rose and followed him. 2 voices came from behind the study door, my father's and a woman's. A soft yellow light glowed around its edges. There was something familiar about her voice, and I moved closer to listen. "You must leave at once," he said. "I will do as I please. We have our guests, most important guests." "You do not think me important?" A beat. No, I didn't mean, does it have to be now? Through the half-open door, I could see my father, hands clasped behind his back to stop him gesturing, feet planted firmly and apart. Every trick he knew to appear statesman-like. But the strain in his face was as bad as it had been the day he arrived back from Berlin. There was something else. Fear. In a large Louis XV chair upholstered in blood-red velvet sat a woman dressed head to toe in black. Or not quite toe. She wore a high-necked black dress and shapeless crepe. Hands gloved in black silk, an obsidian round studded the choker at her neck, and the bracelets around her wrist. Her hair was hidden under an old-fashioned bonnet, and from its brim hung a heavy black veil that only allowed the slightest suggestion of nose and chin. It would have been the most remarkable thing about her, except for the feet peeking out from under the hem of her dress, completely bare and caked in dirt. "Pick a companion, or I will choose one for myself." All the hairs prickled along the back of my neck. That voice! The monster had roused from its cave. The witch walked among us. She rose and prowled across the room to my father, tattered skirts dragging on the floor. "Perhaps I'll go downstairs to meet these charming guests of yours and find one among them." I couldn't look away from those bare feet, something so wild and animal juxtaposed with the plush, mundane tread of the rug beneath them. "I forbid it." "You think you hold power to forbid me anything." "I will not have half of Germany thinking us backwoods simpletons beholden to fairy tales and witches." "Don't be a fool. You know who and what I am," she said, voice rising like thunder. "Give me what I ask for now, or I'll make all the godforsaken souls in this palace tremble with the fearing of me." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cowed. Finally understood it. The witch didn't take a victim. She made us choose. One person in exchange for all our safety. She made us complicit in her cruelty by forcing us to offer a human sacrifice. I looked at my father in newfound anger. He knew. He had always known. Who did he plan to offer her? One of the footmen? A stable hand? A farm boy snatched unsuspecting from the evening fields? Someone was to be plucked from their life and given a new one. Or perhaps their life would be over the minute they left with the witch. I wanted to think if my mother had been here, she would have been braver than my father, but I knew it wasn't true. She would have collapsed under the pressure of the witch's will, helpless. They had both always pretended to be so helpless, as though their choices were something foisted on them, not the result of their own desires. I had thought myself helpless too, at the mercy of my father and stepmother, disposed of as a lady's companion before I became any more of an inconvenience. I realized I was going to do something extremely stupid. I was going to do it now, before I understood the difference between reckless and brave. "I'll go," I said. It was like stepping off a roof, slipping under the ice, drastic, exhilarating, destructive. The witch and my father turned to me as I pushed the door open. "Mina, what are you doing here?" My father's face was wide with horror. "Go downstairs at once." I ignored him. I was terrified, but in a numb, distant sort of way. Like I was walking out on stage in my debut role, but at the same time watching myself from some great height. "I'll be your companion," I said to the witch. I waited for my father to protest again, but the guilt was written clear across his face. He was considering my offer. I saw he would do it. He would send me with her, if it benefited him. And it would. The problem of the witch cleared away without another soul involved, and the problem of me. His conference to woo Bismarck could continue undisturbed, and his duchy would be safe another 50 years. I thought of how it would look for him, a noble sacrifice by a selfless ruler to secure a future for everyone. All it would cost him was his firstborn daughter. Good, I was glad. At least this way I knew where I stood. "Mina." "Father." "You don't understand what you're saying." He looked like an old man, tired and folded in on himself. Perhaps he did care for me in his own distant way. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I know what it is I do. I turned to the witch. If you will have me? You? A note of something almost like amusement coloured her voice, and I wanted to know what type of face lay under that veil. One that could still express humour, it seemed. One that was not just cold and commanding. Will I not do? She cocked her head. Leave us, she said to my father. She's my daughter. The witch turned to look at him, veil pleating around her face like the statues in the graveyard forever weeping over tombs. He stopped talking. Avoiding my eye, he left me alone with the witch. She caught up the edges of her veil and lifted it in one smooth movement, casting it behind her. I drew in a breath sharp with shock. The witch's face was smooth and pale like chalk, her eyes impossibly dark, lips full and red. The gloss of black hair, the quirk of a lip, and finally I placed her voice. The woman in the stables. I blushed, thinking of what she knew of me, a coward, hiding. Bare feet silenced on the carpet, she circled me, sharp eye looking me over. I felt, suddenly, the weight of my need for her to accept me, the urgency of my desire to flee this place. I would take a life of servitude to her than another moment here. And if she killed me, I wasn't sure I'd mind. Perhaps you would offer me a better place to hide than the stables? That seemed to amuse her. The corner of her mouth twitched as it had done before, and I felt a moment of recognition. She raised one hand to my chin, her fingers tilting my head up as she appraised my face. I'd expected the witch to smell of nightmares, of sulphur and blood and fear. Instead, I smelled a confusing mix of moss and earth and rainwater on the stone. She was only a few inches taller than me, but moved as though she were a queen, and I dirt on her shoe. The silk of the glove was slippery and cool against my skin, and a shiver went through me. I felt like an animal on a dissection table, splayed open under a knife. I've never been given a woman before. Do I not meet your requirements? She gave this some consideration. It makes no difference. You will come with me willingly? I do. So confident when you know nothing of me, nothing of what you are walking towards. I meet her gaze, the beetle black eyes and blood-red lips. No, but I know what I'm walking away from, and that is enough. She held my chin a moment longer, the intensity of her attention like a great pressure bearing down on me, the world reduced to her and I, and the thin air we shared between us. Then she broke contact, lowered her veil, and called my father back into the room. I will have her. I didn't miss the small flash of relief across his face. I felt strangely light, as though my body were not my own. I had done something. There must be a binding, said the witch. Give me your ribbon. I pulled the choker from around my neck and handed it to her. She placed one gloved hand over mine, then wrapped the ribbon around both of us, tight enough my fingertips began to tingle from lack of blood. Face to face at the altar of the window frame, a cold light hallowed her from behind, casting her into a dark column of black silk. We were joined at the wrist, at the pulse point, the warmth of her body reaching me even through the cloth. My heart was racing, but her heartbeat was slow, so incredibly slow and steady. This was strength, life, power. Swear yourself to me. I swear. No, by the old words. My mouth was too dry. For a moment I couldn't work out what she meant. Then I thought of the shrine in the woods, the branches laid out on either side of it. By oak, I whispered, by ash, by Bitterthorn. I swear a bloody oath to you. The oldest words in Schwarzstein. Words of the woods and midnight fear. The words invoked to ward against the witch, now bound me to her. I thought she might smile now. She had what she came for, but her face was as deathly serious as I felt. Her free hand darted out, and something pricked my skin. A dot of red blood appeared in my glove, and seeped into hers. She was speaking, but I couldn't hear the words clearly, like voices in next door room, or when I was sick with fever, the sounds and shapes were familiar, but I couldn't grasp them before they slipped away like water. A pressure clamped around my head, and my knees threatened to buckle. All along the skin of my arms, my hand, my fingers, was a soft battery light, brightest at the ribbon that bound us, like I was a candle and the ribbon the wick. Just as apprehension was tipping towards dread, she whipped the ribbon away, and the pressure cut out. I rubbed my wrist, working feeling back into my fingers. "It is done. You are bound." She slipped the ribbon into some pocket concealed in her skirts. "Come, we leave at once." "But it is so late," I said. "And? Would you give me a night to pack?" I'd almost said, to say goodbye. My father had remained silent through the binding, standing stiffly with one hand on the back of his chair, as if for support. He didn't look at me once. If he couldn't be a good father to me, I felt spiteful pleasure, at least to know he was ashamed of being a poor one. "Very well." She swept from the room, pausing only in the doorway to turn back to us, beautiful and terrible. I thought of her dirty feet tracking up the carpets and across the marble, a wild animal loose in our midst. "We leave at first light tomorrow. I will not wait." A shiver passed through me as I realized what I had done. She was no woman, but a witch, and I had bound myself into her service.